Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're kind of shifting gears a bit. We're moving away from ghosts and the supernatural because, as unsettling as those tales can be, sometimes the deepest horror, the really chilling stuff isn't fictional. It's right next door or maybe buried deep in history. We're talking about, real monsters, human ones. And today, we're not just listing events. We're going to unfold some really unsettling stories about families whose actions are just hard to grasp. We're pulling these directly from the sources you shared, looking at the human capacity for darkness, how depravity can just sort of emerge.
Exactly. And these stories, they really make you think, don't they? About the hidden parts of human nature, how truly awful things can fester behind, a totally ordinary front, and how family ties, the things that should bind us, can twist into something terrifying. We'll sort of trace that line, from maybe just odd quirks to outright evil.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. Our first example is the Ward family. They lived in a place called Dark Hollow, just outside Pittsburgh. And you have to picture this neighborhood. It sounds nice, tree-lined streets, older houses. Seemed okay on the surface. But for the person who shared this story, living next to the Wards, well, it was a nightmare. A genuine nightmare. Let's talk about Win first, the father. If you were a girl or a woman, he was all politeness. Sickeningly so. Almost. Flirty. The narrator, when she was a teen, she talked about catching this look in his eye. She called it beastly, ravenous, like a hunger. It just unnerved her completely. And there was this one really creepy time in a convenience store. He followed her in, pretending it was nothing, but then he got so close, she could actually hear him sniffing, like sniffing the air near her, trying to smell her. She was so freaked out, she just bolted from the store.
Fair in the coin.
If you were a boy or a man, Win was completely different, menacing. Her brother, right. He just used their driveway quickly to turn his car around. Win comes charging out of the house, swinging a baseball bat. Yeah, her brother said if he hadn't floored it, Win would have smashed his car up. Seriously. Then you had Maggie, the wife. Her look was just jarring. Really heavy makeup, pencil-thin eyebrows drawn on, made her look way older. And she'd just sit on their porch, seemingly forever, knitting. But it wasn't knitting. It was this tangled mess of, lime green yarn. A spider web. She'd just poke at it with needles, kind of in a trance. Never actually made anything. And here's where it gets really, really weird. The narrator had to return some mail once, right? Found Maggie on the porch singing Ring Around the Rosie, but in this horrible, creaky nails on a chalkboard voice. Then she stops singing and starts explaining the whole Black Death origin of the song to this young kid with her face, as the narrator put it, all painted up like some circus clown. Just profoundly disturbing. Okay, then the kids, the younger son, Jacob, he had this really toxic obsession with Native American culture, made his own headdresses, painted his face, and he hit a bow and arrow. Now, his parents insisted they were harmless. Sucker tips, But lots of people, including the narrator, they swore they saw him with actual sharp-tipped arrows. And he'd aim them at people, draw the string back, scramble for cover. He never actually shot when adults were watching, but that threat, it was terrifying.
And that really points to something we see often in these deeply troubled family dynamics. The early signs are there. They're often undeniable, like the community getting alarmed about Jacob, being seen with dead animals, squirrels, pigeons. It led to a social worker visit, which highlights just how hard early intervention can be. People saw something was wrong, but maybe didn't grasp the full extent or couldn't get through.
That progression, it's key. And then the older son, Johnny, he apparently used to growl at other kids in high school.
Yeah.
Just growl, and he eventually got expelled for fighting. But before that, something truly awful happened. His lab partner, a girl, turned him down for a date, so he starts harassing her. And the end point of this, he hid in the backseat of her car, grinning at her when she got in. She freaked out, crashed the car, ended up in the hospital for a week.
God, that's horrifying.
It is. And the community's terrified, but somehow it got brushed off as teenage hijinks.
Probably because the family was too scared of the Wards, maybe, to press charges.
That's what the narrator suspected. Too intimidated. So you can imagine the relief when that for sale sign finally appeared. Just immense relief. They became this local urban legend. And the narrator still seems amazed, looking back, that nothing even worse happened. No actual fatality. It's chilling how that label, teenage hijinks, could cover up something so predatory.
It really speaks to how communities, maybe society in general, can sometimes rationalize things away or just look the other way. It's almost like that idea of the banality of evil, right? It's hard to accept that real danger, real malice can be living in such an ordinary house on an ordinary street. So maybe people just dismiss the red flags until they couldn't anymore.
Okay, so from that kind of slow public decay, let's turn to something more hidden, but just as terrifying. This is the violent neighbor story. First few months, things seemed fine on their street, normal neighbors. Then the music started. Ear-splittingly loud music, usually right in the middle of the night, and not just like annoying bass. We're talking volume so high you literally couldn't sleep through it. People called the cops, fines were issued, but it just kept getting worse. But the awful truth behind it, the noise wasn't the main event. It was cover. Cover for the parents' fistfights. Brutal ones. Both of them would show up with injuries, black eyes, scratches all down the face. Sometimes the dad looked worse off than the mom. They were really hurting each other.
And there's a detail there about the dad threatening the narrator's father. At the time, people sort of dismissed it, just angry bluster. But later, knowing what they were capable of, those threats suddenly seem much, much more serious. It shows how context changes everything, how easily danger can be underestimated initially.
Exactly. Then all of a sudden, silence. The house went completely quiet for a few weeks. Everyone figured, okay, they finally moved. Relief, right? But no, they hadn't moved. The truth came out later. It was horrifying. They'd found their own daughter who had run away, tracked her down somewhere else, beat her to death, and then got rid of her body. Suddenly the street wasn't quiet anymore. It was full of police cars, forensic vans, the people in the white suits. A truly grim scene. It just shows how these odd behaviors, the things people might initially brush off, can be the prelude to something just unthinkable, boiling over in the worst possible way. Okay, so we've seen disturbances escalate. Now let's look at cases where the cruelty seems, calculated, part of the plan from the start. This takes us to Fresno, California, the meth and gang family. The narrator here talks about her mom being incredibly strict when she was a kid, like couldn't play outside much, couldn't go to the store alone. At the time, she thought her mom was just overbearing. But later she realized it was protection from these neighbors. This family, they were apparently deep into meth, deep into gang stuff. The narrator's mother described them as, she used the words sadistic psychopaths committing pure evil. And their method for recruiting people, especially young girls, was just chillingly systematic. They'd lure them in with parties, get them hooked on meth, maybe hold them for days, then loan them out to other people at the parties, and then they'd blackmail them, threats, to make sure they kept coming back, and crucially brought other girls with them. Just a horrible, vicious cycle. Brainwashing, really.
It paints a picture of systematic exploitation on a terrifying scale, and the mother seeing things like unconscious people being carried away and then missing posters appearing later. It suggests the true horror, the number of victims, was likely immense. It's this calculated dehumanization.
Absolutely. Chilling is the right word. And the fear that kept the mother from calling the police, it was paralyzing. This family apparently bragged about having automatic weapons. They explicitly threatened the narrator's family, said if the cops ever came, there'd be a shootout and her family would be caught in the crossfire. Killed. Imagine living next to that, under that constant threat. And then there was another layer. The mother was part Mexican, and she recognized signs of Santa Muerte worship. She heard chickens, goats being sacrificed in their backyard, and she knew this often connected to cartels.
Yeah, and just for clarity, Santa Muerte itself is a folk saint, but unfortunately its imagery has been co-opted by some criminal groups, particularly cartels. So for the mother, seeing that would absolutely amplify the terror. It's just a level of power, connections, untouchability, far beyond just local thugs.
Right. Made them seem even more dangerous, more capable of anything. So the relief, the sheer relief, when her mom finally saved up enough to move them away, escaping that psycho family of meth-addicted death worshippers, as the narrator called them. It must have been unbelievable. What a childhood. Okay, let's shift settings again. Across the Atlantic, 1970s Wiltshire in Britain, a story about the Prestige family. This was a small village, close-knit. Everyone knew everyone else's business. And everyone seemed to agree the Prestige family was peculiar. The narrator's first memory of Lewis, the son, was from primary school. During assembly, he would just weep inconsolably for the whole time, just cry. Fast forward a few years, secondary school. Something truly shocking happens. Lewis's father publicly humiliates him, forces him to walk into school wearing only his underwear, as a lesson apparently for not being ready on time.
Yeah.
The sheer public shame, the trauma of that, it's hard to even imagine.
It really makes you think about the psychological impact. Public humiliation like that from a parent, it's devastating. And the story mentions rumors, right? Social workers visiting. And then, seemingly, a change in Lewis. New uniform, suddenly more confident, talking to other kids. But was that change real? Or just a mask? A coping mechanism? It's so complex how kids react to that kind of abuse.
That's a really good point. He seemed like a totally different kid. But even so, the narrator and his friends, they still avoided him. Like, Lewis would invite them over to his house, the prestige house, but they always made excuses. Some kind of instinct, maybe. Just didn't want to go there. Then there was a long bank holiday weekend. Afterwards, Lewis doesn't show up at school. He's gone for a whole week. Around the same time, there's weird police activity in the village. Nothing official said, but people noticed. It wasn't until years later that the narrator pieced it all together. The horrifying truth. Lewis had killed his parents.
Looking back now, with that knowledge, the details just click into place, don't they? Chillingly. Lewis showing up after the incident in his own clothes, not his uniform, probably means he had to get rid of clothes that were stained. And the really terrifying thought, if the narrator and his friends had gone over to Lewis's house that day, what would they have found? They might have discovered the bodies. And then, what would Lewis have done? Could they have become victims too? It's a truly awful possibility.
It just leaves you with this deeply unsettling question, doesn't it? What kind of torture, what kind of hell pushes a child to do something like that? And how could committing such an act possibly bring about? Well, the story implies a kind of unsettling peace. Or happiness, even. It really does haunt you. All right, let's delve way back into history now, way back to 16th century Scotland and the infamous legend of the Sawney Bean clan. Alexander Bean, born to a laborer, but he wasn't interested in honest work, rejected it early on. He did train as a tanner, though, learned how to work with hides, a skill that would later take a very, very dark turn. Then he meets Black Agnes, described as his equally violent soulmate. His parents didn't approve. There were rumors about her, witchcraft maybe, so they eloped. Started out simple enough, in a grim way, ambushing travelers, robbing them, murdering them, standard banditry almost. But then things escalated horrifically. They decided to, and this phrase is chilling, cut costs. How? By eating their victims. Cannibalism and Alexander's tanning skills. Yeah, he started using them on human bodies.
And a crucial element here is where they lived. They found this cave, a coastal cave, near a place called Benane Head. It was huge, apparently almost 200 meters deep. And the entrance was completely cut off by the sea at high tide, a perfect natural fortress. This hiding spot allowed them to operate completely undetected for something like 25 years. It became this isolated little world of horror.
They absolutely used that isolation. And the clan, it grew through incest, interfamily breeding. Ended up with, 8 sons, 6 daughters, 18 grandsons, 14 granddaughters. It wasn't just a family anymore. It was an industry. Robbery, murder, cannibalism. That was their trade. They even developed methods, pickling human meat to preserve it for winter. And they were smart. In a gruesome way, they tossed bones and remains out into the sea, miles away sometimes, to throw off the local villagers, make them think that disappearances were happening elsewhere. But people kept vanishing. The local communities were terrified, frustrated, started lynching innocent people like innkeepers, thinking they were responsible. Until one night, the Beans messed up. They attacked a couple, but the man was a former soldier. He fought back fiercely. He managed to hold them off, but not before he saw them. Well, the account says they carved up his wife while she was still alive. He escaped, but witnessed that horror. That survivor's story finally reached the top. King James VI of Scotland. He was horrified. He personally led a force, like 600 men, bloodhounds, tracked them right to that hidden cave. And the scene inside, it was grotesque. Piles of stolen loot, clothes, jewelry, but also dried human limbs hanging like meat, barrels packed with pickled organs. And the family itself, this inbred clan, described as looking barely human.
The aftermath was brutal. No trial. Summary executions. Alexander Bean himself was dismembered, pulled apart while still alive, bleeding out. His supposed last words were something like, "It isn't over, it will never be over." Just defiant horror to the very end. Agnes, the women, the children, tied to stakes and burned alive. It raises questions about, justice versus vengeance when society confronts something it deems utterly inhuman. They were seen as beyond trial.
Yeah. And okay, there's some debate among historians. Was Sawney Bean a real person, or maybe English propaganda against the Scots? The name Sawney Bean might suggest that, but there's other evidence. A writer named Nathaniel Crouch documented a very similar case back in 1696, describing a cannibal family from 1459. In that account, a 12-year-old girl supposedly confessed she actually enjoyed eating human flesh more than anything else.
Right. So whether it was one single Sawney Bean clan or maybe several different groups practicing this over time, the chilling takeaway seems to be that this kind of predatory, pleasure-driven cannibalism, it seems to have been a real horrifying phenomenon in Scotland back then.
A truly dark chapter. Okay, let's bring it forward again. Right up to recent times. Southern Russia, the Podkopaya family. And the facade here was disturbingly normal. Anessa Tarverdieva, she was a nursery school teacher. Her husband, Roman Podkopayev, a dentist. They had a 13-year-old daughter, Victoria. Seemed like a comfortable middle-class life, but they had a secret, a truly dark one. Their camping trips down near Rostov. They weren't camping trips, they were hunting trips. For people, their first known attack, February 2008. The victim was Mikhail Zlidnev, head of his security department. They hit his house with almost military precision, broke in, subdued him and his wife. Then they butchered the couple with knives, made Mikhail watch as they killed his wife first, and they took things, trophies, the reports called them, mementos from their first kill.
That first act, it wasn't about need, not robbery primarily. It seems like it was about power, domination, and crucially, it didn't satisfy them. It seems to have fueled something, a bloodlust. The subsequent attacks weren't even about targets like Zlidnev. They seemed to become purely about the act of killing, for sport.
That bloodlust definitely drove them. July 2008, they just opened fire on a car on the highway. Killed a man named Alexei Sazonov, badly wounded his companion, Julia Vasilyeva. She survived somehow, lived to tell the tale. Then July 2009. One of their most brutal attacks. Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Chudakov, a paratrooper, was traveling with his family. Anessa apparently used a semi-automatic shotgun, just blasted the car, killed Chudakov, his wife, their young son instantly. Then Roman and the daughter, Victoria, who was only 13, remember, dragged the 11-year-old daughter, Veronica, out of the car and stabbed her almost 40 times. They found valuable jewelry in the car later, nearly $1,500 worth. They didn't take it.
Which underscores the motive again. It wasn't robbery. It was killing for the sake of killing, purely for sport, as you said.
Because Chudakov was high-ranking military, this became huge news, front-page stuff. Police were under immense pressure, and tragically, they ended up arresting and convicting an innocent man for the Chudakov murders. He spent time in prison before the truth came out. After that, the Podkopayev seemed to shift slightly, more towards financially motivated crimes, but still incredibly brutal. Anessa actually targeted her own goddaughter's family, tortured the girls to find out where money and weapons were hidden. And when they resisted, Anessa killed her own goddaughter. After, reports say, one of the other girls had her eyeballs gouged out. Just unimaginable cruelty.
And their methods kept evolving, adapting. They went on this 4-year spree of home invasions. Then they developed a new tactic. They deliberately set off burglar alarms in homes or businesses. Then they'd lie in wait and ambush the security guards or police who responded. They murdered several that way. It shows this cold, calculated planning.
Their final run was in September 2013. They shot a couple just out for a walk, then broke into a former military officer's house nearby, stole the weirdest things, candles and chicken drumsticks. Bizarre. Later that same day, they got pulled over by a police officer, Ivan Chakovoy. They just executed him on the spot. That was the end, though. Another officer nearby engaged them. Roman was killed. Anessa and Victoria were wounded, captured. When they searched their car and home, just an arsenal. Guns, grenades, knives, tons of ammo. Anessa confessed. Said she did it because she hated police. And the final shock. Her own brother-in-law, who was a policeman, had been helping them, feeding them inside information.
It just leaves you grasping, doesn't it? What makes people like this? It wasn't survival. It wasn't even just greed, though that came into it later. It seems to boil down to this hideous, evil desire to dominate, to destroy. They got a thrill, a perverse pleasure from hunting and killing other human beings. They even found knives inscribed to my beloved bandit girl and to my beloved Amazon. That tells you everything about how they saw themselves, reveling in it, identifying with the evil.
So as we sort of come back from that really dark place, revisiting these stories, it's stark, isn't it? These narratives, they're terrifying, yes.
Yeah.
But they give us this unfiltered look into the really dark corners of, well, us, human nature. And the reminder that evil, real evil, doesn't always announce itself. It can wear the most ordinary face. Live in the house next door.
Absolutely. And these cases, they really force you to question assumptions, don't they? About the people around us, about what might be going on beneath the surface of just everyday life. It makes you wonder what really drives people, what drives families to do things that are so extreme, so unspeakable. And you're left with that question, what truly creates a monster?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today into some really unsettling territory. We know it's heavy stuff. But remember, even understanding the macabre, the dark parts, is still a form of knowledge. Hopefully these stories offer some perspective, maybe things to think about as you look at the world. Before we go, if you found this exploration as compelling and chilling as we did, please do take a moment, like this deep dive, share it with others who might be interested in these kinds of explorations, and definitely subscribe to our channel, Horror Docx. That way you won't miss future deep dives. Until next time, stay curious, and please be safe out there.